Chapter 1. The Dying Hour. The midwife had stopped coming to the door. Elspeth knew this because she could hear the woman's footsteps retreat down the corridor 3 hours past, the hurried clicks of heels against stone that spoke of fear more than duty. The labor pains had begun at sunset. Fitting, she thought with delirious clarity, that she should die as darkness claimed the world. Her husband's family had locked her in the eastern tower of Blackthorn Manor, the room where unwanted wives went to birth unwanted heirs, or to perish trying. The sheets beneath her were soaked through with blood and sweat, and the candles guttered in their sconces as if death itself breathed upon them. "Please," Elspeth whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking. "Someone." But there was no one. Her husband, Lord Edmund Ashford, had departed for London the moment her belly began to swell, unwilling to watch his mistake come to term. His mother, the Dowager Lady Ashford, had made her feelings abundantly clear. If Elspeth survived the birth, she would be sent to a convent. If she did not, well, the family would mourn appropriately. Another contraction tore through her, and Elspeth screamed into the pillow, tasting copper and salt. The baby wasn't moving anymore. She could feel the terrible stillness in her womb, the absence where life should have been. They would both die here, mother and child, unmourned and forgotten. The window rattled. At first, Elspeth thought it was the wind. The autumn storms had been fierce this year, battering the coast with rain and fury. But the sound came again, deliberate and rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. She turned her head, vision swimming. The window was 3 stories up, impossible to reach without a ladder. Yet something moved beyond the glass, a shadow darker than the moonless night. The latch clicked open of its own accord. Cold air rushed into the room, extinguishing half the candles, and carrying with it the scent of earth and ancient stone. The shadow poured through the window like liquid midnight, coalescing into the form of a man. No, not a man. He stood at the foot of her bed, impossibly tall and perfectly still. His face was carved from marble, beautiful and terrible in equal measure, with features that belonged to classical statues and funeral monuments. Black hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes were the color of fresh blood in moonlight. "You called," he said, and his voice was silk dragged over broken glass. "I heard you." Elspeth tried to speak, but another wave of pain silenced her. She curled into herself, dimly aware that she should be afraid. This creature, this thing, was not human, could never be human. The wrongness of him sang in her bones, primal and absolute. He moved to her side with inhuman grace, and she saw his clothes were centuries out of fashion. A black coat with silver fastenings, a cravat pinned with a blood-red ruby. His skin held no warmth, no flush of life. When he reached toward her, she flinched. "Peace," he murmured. "I do not come to harm you." "What are you?" The words scraped from her throat. His lips curved, revealing the barest hint of elongated canines. "I am called Cassius, and I am what your kind fears in the darkness." He tilted his head, studying her with those impossible eyes. "You are dying." "I know." A sob caught in her chest. "My baby is already gone." His tone held no cruelty, only fact. "You have perhaps an hour. Less, if the bleeding continues." Elspeth closed her eyes. She had known, of course, had felt the terrible wrongness, but hearing it spoken aloud shattered something inside her. "Then why did you come?" "Because you called." Cassius sat on the edge of the bed, and the mattress did not shift beneath his weight. "Because I have been watching this house for 3 generations, waiting. Because your blood." He inhaled deeply, and hunger flashed across his perfect features. "Your blood sings to me as no other has in 5 centuries. She should have been terrified, should have been screaming for help, despite knowing none would come. Instead, Elspeth found herself studying him with the clarity that came at death's threshold. He was beautiful the way winter was beautiful, deadly and eternal and utterly inhuman. "What do you want?" she whispered. Cassius leaned closer, and she could see now that his skin held a faint luminescence, as if moonlight lived beneath the surface. I want to offer you a choice. Die here, forgotten and alone, your name erased from the family ledgers, or... His hand hovered above her throat, not quite touching. Live forever. I don't understand. I can give you eternity. His eyes held hers, hypnotic and terrible. I can take away the pain, the mortality, the weakness of your human form. You would never again know hunger or illness or age. You would be powerful beyond imagining, beautiful beyond death. A vampire, Elspeth breathed. The word tasted like ashes and honey. Yes. He smiled, and it was a predator's expression. My eternal companion, my queen in darkness. Another contraction seized her, weaker this time. She could feel her heartbeat growing sluggish, erratic. The blood pooled beneath her, warm and damning. Minutes, perhaps. That was all she had left. Why me? She asked. Why not let me die? Cassius traced a finger along her jawline, his touch ice-cold and electrifying. Because I have walked this earth for 500 years, and in all that time, I have never encountered a soul whose blood called to mine as yours does. Because I am weary of eternity alone. Because... His voice dropped to a whisper. Because you deserve better than this death. Elspeth thought of her husband, who had never loved her, of his family, who had locked her away to die, of the brief, brutal life she'd known, 23 years of duty and disappointment, ending in blood-soaked sheets and abandonment. What did she have to lose? Will it hurt? She asked. Cassius's expression softened, showing something that might have been compassion if monsters could feel such things. Yes, but only for a moment. And then... He leaned down until his lips brushed her ear. Then you will know what it means to be truly alive. She nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in her throat. He moved with terrible swiftness, gathering her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. His chest held no heartbeat, no warmth, yet somehow Elspeth felt safer than she had in months. Cassius cradled her like something precious, tilting her head to expose the vulnerable curve of her throat. Forgive me, he whispered, and sank his fangs into her flesh. The pain was exquisite and absolute, a white-hot lance that drove through every nerve. Elspeth gasped, her hands clutching at his coat as her blood flowed into his mouth. She could feel him drinking deeply, drawing out her life in long, desperate pulls. The room grew dim. Her heartbeat faltered. Death reached for her with gentle hands. And then Cassius pulled back, crimson staining his lips. Before she could draw breath, he tore his own wrist open with his fangs and pressed the wound to her mouth. Drink, he commanded. Drink and live forever. The taste of his blood was ancient wine and forbidden darkness. It burned down her throat like liquid fire, remaking her from the inside out. Elspeth drank because she had no choice, because her body demanded it, because something deep and primal recognized this as salvation. Power flooded through her veins. Her vision sharpened impossibly. She could hear Cassius's breath, could smell the earth on his clothes, could feel the vast weight of his immortal years pressing against her consciousness. And then the transformation seized her, and Elspeth Ashford began to die so that something new could be born. Chapter 2. The Awakening Hunger. Elspeth woke to absolute darkness and perfect clarity. Every sense had been magnified 1,000-fold. She could hear the mice in the walls, their tiny hearts pattering like distant drums, could smell the mold growing in the eastern corner of the tower, the dried blood on the sheets, the lingering scent of Cassius, cold stone and ancient crypts, and something indefinably other, could feel the individual threads in the fabric beneath her fingers. She sat up, movements fluid in a way they had never been before. No pain, no weakness, no exhaustion from the labor that had been killing her mere hours ago. Her hands flew to her stomach, now flat and unmarked. The baby was gone. She had known it would be, had felt the terrible stillness before Cassius arrived. Yet grief washed through her anyway, sharp and fresh. The transformation purges all weakness from the body. His voice emerged from the shadows near the window. "Including pregnancy. I am sorry. There was no other way." Elspeth looked toward him and gasped. She could see him perfectly despite the darkness, every detail rendered in shades of silver and gray. He Maiminag stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, coat rippling in the night breeze from the still open window. "What have you done to me?" Her voice sounded different, richer, more resonant. "I have made you immortal." Cassius turned, and she saw hunger in his eyes. "How do you feel?" She considered the question. Her body thrummed with energy, as if lightning coursed through her veins instead of blood. Everything seemed sharper, more vivid. The world had been rendered in watercolors before. Now it blazed in oils. "Alive," she whispered. "For the first time in my life, I feel truly alive." His lips curved in approval. "Good. The transformation has taken hold cleanly. Some do not survive it. The mortal body rejects the immortal blood, and they perish in agony. But you—" He crossed to her in 2 impossibly swift strides. "You were made for this." Elspeth should have recoiled from his proximity. Instead, she found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something primal and inexorable. His scent wrapped around her, earth and time and darkness, and she realized with shock that it was intoxicating. "Why do you smell so—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Because we are bound now." Cassius traced a finger along her throat, over the place where he had bitten her. The wounds had already healed, leaving only the faintest marks. "My blood runs in your veins. You are mine, and I am yours. It is the nature of the turning." "I didn't ask for this," she said, though the words lacked conviction. "No. You asked for life. I merely provided the means." His hand lingered at her throat, and she felt her pulse jump beneath his fingers. Did vampires even have pulses? "Now you must learn what it means to be one of the eternal." As if summoned by his words, hunger crashed over Elspeth like a wave. It started in her stomach, a hollow, gnawing ache, and spread through her entire body. Her gums burned. When she touched her mouth, she felt the unfamiliar sharpness of elongated canines. Fangs. She had fangs. "What's happening?" Panic crept into her voice. The bloodlust. Cassius's expression grew grave. "You have not fed yet. The transformation requires tremendous energy. You consumed most of my blood in the turning. Now your body demands more." He stepped back, putting distance between them. "And I am the nearest source." Elspeth's gaze fixed on his throat, and the hunger intensified until it was nearly painful. She could see the vein pulsing beneath his pale skin, could imagine the taste of his blood on her tongue. Ancient, powerful, necessary. She lunged before conscious thought could stop her. Cassius caught her wrists easily, holding her at arm's length despite her newfound strength. "No," he said firmly. "Not from me. Not for your first feeding." "Please." The word came out as a growl. I know." His grip gentled, but remained unbreakable. "But drinking from your sire too soon after turning creates a dangerous dependency. You would become bound to me in ways that transcend the physical. Some fledglings never recover their autonomy." "Then what?" Elspeth struggled against his hold, shame and hunger warring within her. "What do I do?" Cassius released her and moved to the window, peering out into the night. "We hunt. There is a village 2 miles distant. Mortals sleep unaware of the predator in their midst." He glanced back at her. "I will teach you to feed cleanly, to take only what you need, to leave them with nothing but confused dreams come morning." The thought should have horrified her. She should have wept at the monster she had become. Instead, Elspeth felt only anticipation. The hunger demanded satisfaction, and morality seemed a distant, mortal concern. "Come." Cassius extended his hand. "Your education begins now." She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His skin was cold as marble, yet somehow comforting. When he pulled her to her feet, she marveled at how steady she felt. No lingering weakness from the birth, no pain from the transformation, only power. "Can I truly do this?" she asked as he led her toward the window. "Walk among them without killing?" "With discipline, yes." He stepped onto the narrow ledge 3 stories up without hesitation. The bloodlust is strongest in the first decade. Many fledglings become monsters, unable to stop once they start feeding. But I have walked this earth for 5 centuries. I will teach you control. Elspeth looked at the dizzying drop. In her mortal life, she had feared heights. Now, standing on the ledge beside Cassius, she felt only exhilaration. "How do we—" He pulled her against him, one arm around her waist. "Hold tight, and trust me." They fell. No, they flew. The night air whipped past them as Cassius leaped from the tower, landing in the courtyard below with impossible grace. Elspeth laughed aloud, giddy with the sensation. She had flown. The laws of nature that had bound her all her life meant nothing now. "Freedom," Cassius murmured against her ear. "You begin to understand." They ran through the darkness, moving so swiftly the world blurred around them. Elspeth had never imagined such speed was possible. Trees became streaks of shadow. The moon hung low and enormous in the sky. The wind sang in her ears. Within minutes they reached the outskirts of Thornberry village. Cassius slowed, guiding her into the shelter of a grove. He pressed a finger to his lips, then pointed to a cottage at the edge of the settlement. "The blacksmith," he whispered. "Strong, healthy blood. He will recover quickly from a light feeding. How do we—" Cassius moved before she could finish the question. He appeared at the cottage window, silent as smoke, and opened the latch with a gesture. Elspeth followed, marveling at how naturally the predatory instincts came to her. Inside, a man slept in his bed, middle-aged, powerfully built, unaware of the monsters at his bedside. Cassius gestured for Elspeth to approach. "Listen to his heartbeat," he instructed quietly. "Let it guide you. Take 3 mouthfuls, no more, and seal the wound with your tongue when you finish. Your saliva carries an agent that promotes healing and clouds memory." Elspeth leaned over the sleeping man. Up close, she could hear everything. The rush of blood through his veins, the steady thump of his heart, the warm breath that smelled of ale and bread. The hunger roared to life, demanding she tear into his throat and drink until nothing remained. "Control," Cassius reminded her. "You are not a beast. You are eternal." She struck with precision, fangs piercing the soft flesh of the blacksmith's neck. Hot blood flooded her mouth, rich and coppery and utterly intoxicating. It was nothing like Cassius's blood, which had tasted of ancient power. This was life itself, pure and vibrant. Elspeth drank deeply, and the world exploded into sensation. She could feel the blacksmith's memories flickering at the edges of her consciousness. His wife's laugh, his daughter's wedding, the rhythm of hammer on anvil. The blood carried pieces of his soul. "Enough," Cassius said sharply, pulling her back. She resisted, wanting more, needing. His hand closed around her throat, not painfully, but with enough pressure to break through the bloodlust. "Enough, Elspeth. You will kill him." The words penetrated the haze. She jerked back, horrified at how close she had come to murdering an innocent man. Her tongue moved instinctively over the wounds, and she felt them close beneath her touch. The blacksmith slept on, oblivious. "I almost—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "But you didn't." Cassius guided her away from the cottage, back into the night. "The first feeding is always the hardest. You did well." Elspeth looked down at her hands, expecting to see them stained with blood, but her skin was clean, unmarked, as if she hadn't just fed on a living human being. "What have I become?" The question escaped as a whisper. Cassius stopped and turned to face her. In the moonlight, he looked like something from a fever dream, beautiful and terrible and infinitely old. "You have become free," he said simply. "Free from death, from weakness, from the cruelty of those who sought to discard you. You are mine now, Elspeth Ashford, my creation, my responsibility." He paused, and something unreadable flickered across his features. "My queen." Chapter 3. The Manor of Shadows. Cassius did not return Elspeth to Blackthorn Manor. Instead, he brought her to Ravencross, an ancient estate that crouched on the cliffs like a predator surveying its domain. The house was older than memory, built from black stone that seemed to absorb moonlight rather than reflect it. Gargoyles leered from the parapets, and every window was shrouded in heavy velvet that permitted no hint of dawn's approach. "This has been my home for 3 centuries," Cassius said as they passed through iron gates that opened at his touch. "Now it is yours as well." Elspeth stared at the Gothic monstrosity before her. Blackthorn had been impressive in its way, a testament to the Ashford family's wealth and status. But Ravencross was something else entirely. It breathed age and secrets, as if the stones themselves remembered darker times. "How many others live here?" she asked. "None. I prefer solitude." He glanced at her sidelong. "Until now." The entrance hall stretched impossibly high, disappearing into shadows that even her enhanced vision could not fully penetrate. A grand staircase swept upward, its banister carved with scenes of medieval battles and ancient rituals. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of men and women in clothing from eras long past, their eyes seeming to follow her movement. "Your previous companions?" Elspeth guessed. "Failed experiments, most of them." Cassius's voice held a note of regret. "I have turned only 7 mortals in 5 centuries. 3 went mad within their first year, unable to accept their new nature. 2 became monsters. They refused to learn control and had to be dealt with. 1 chose to greet the dawn after a century, weary of eternity. And the last? Betrayed me to vampire hunters in the year 1642. His expression hardened. "She believed she could use their holy weapons to free herself from our bond. She was wrong." Elspeth absorbed this information, recognizing the warning beneath his words. She was bound to this creature now, for better or worse. The blood they shared created ties she was only beginning to understand. Cassius led her through a maze of corridors, each more lavish than the last. They passed a ballroom with chandeliers that tinkled softly in the absence of wind, a library whose shelves stretched 3 stories high, a conservatory filled with night-blooming flowers that released heady perfumes. Finally, he opened a door to reveal what could only be described as a sanctuary. The room was enormous, decorated in shades of midnight blue and silver. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silk that shimmered like starlight. Heavy curtains covered the windows, blackout curtains, Elspeth realized, to protect from the deadly sun. A wardrobe stood against one wall, and when Cassius opened it, she saw dozens of gowns in rich fabrics and dark colors. "These belong to Eleanor," he said quietly. "The one who chose the dawn. She was approximately your size. Until we can arrange for a proper wardrobe, you may use her things." Elspeth ran her fingers over the garments. They were beautiful, far more beautiful than anything she had owned in her mortal life. Silks and velvets, embroidered with silver thread and adorned with jet beads, clothing fit for a queen or a vampire. "Thank you," she murmured. Cassius closed the wardrobe and turned to face her. In the lamplight, his features were carved from shadow and bone. "You must understand the rules of this existence, Elspeth. The sun will kill you. Even indirect exposure through a window can cause severe burns. You must rest during daylight hours in complete darkness. Silver weakens us, though it does not kill. Holy symbols hold power only if wielded by one with true faith. They are rare in this modern age." "And stakes through the heart?" She meant it as a joke, but his expression remained grave. "Will indeed kill us, as will decapitation or fire. We are not invulnerable, merely difficult to destroy." He moved closer. "But your greatest danger comes not from external threats, but from within. The bloodlust will tempt you daily. The isolation of immortality will weigh upon your soul. And the bond between us." He paused. "The bond can be as much prison as blessing." "What do you mean?" Cassius reached up and touched her face, his cold fingers tracing the line of her cheekbone. "I can sense you now, always. Your emotions, your hungers, your fears, and you will come to sense me as well. We are connected in ways that mortal marriage could never achieve. Some find comfort in this. Others find it suffocating. Elspeth leaned into his touch without thinking. The gesture felt natural, as if her body already recognized him as its anchor. And what do you find it? Necessary. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. I have been alone too long, Elspeth. 5 centuries of watching the world change while I remain frozen in time. 5 centuries of maintaining this estate, these secrets, this existence. All of it meaningless without someone to share it with. Why me? The question had haunted her since he first appeared at her window. You said my blood called to you, but surely others. No. The word came out sharp, almost angry. I have tasted thousands in my existence. I have walked through crowds and smelled the blood of nobles and paupers, saints and sinners. But never, never have I encountered a mortal whose blood resonated with mine the way yours does. He pulled back, pacing toward the window. It is like a key finding its lock, like 2 halves of a broken mirror joining together. I felt you the moment you arrived at Blackthorn Manor 3 years ago, but you were married, your life your own. I told myself to stay away, but you watched me anyway. I could not help myself. He laughed bitterly. Each night, I stood in the shadows of your room, listening to your heartbeat, breathing in your scent, watching you sleep and knowing I had no right to disturb your mortal life. But then, his hands clenched into fists. Then they locked you away to die, and I would not allow it. Elspeth moved to stand beside him at the window. Dawn was still hours away, but she could feel the approach of day in her bones. A primal warning system. So you saved me. I claimed you. He turned to face her fully. Make no mistake, Elspeth. I did not turn you out of altruism or pity. I turned you because I wanted you, because the thought of your death was unbearable, because I am an ancient, selfish creature who takes what he desires. She should have been frightened by the admission. Instead, heat curled low in her belly, a different kind of hunger than the bloodlust. She was acutely aware of his proximity, the way shadows clung to him like lovers, the inhuman beauty of his face. And what do you desire now? The question came out barely above a whisper. Cassius's eyes darkened to the color of old wine. To show you everything immortality offers, to teach you the art of darkness, to bind you to me so completely that you could never imagine existing apart from me. He cupped her face with both hands, but also to give you time. You are newly turned, still adjusting to your transformation. The bond between sire and fledgling is complex. What you feel now may be gratitude or fascination, or the echo of my own desires reflected back at me. I will not take advantage of that. How noble, Elspeth said, and was surprised by the sarcasm in her tone. His lips quirked. I am many things, but noble is not among them. I simply prefer my companions to come to me willingly, fully aware of what they choose. He released her and stepped back. You have eternity to explore these feelings. For now, you need to rest. The sun rises in 2 hours, and your first day's sleep will be disorienting. As if on cue, exhaustion crashed over Elspeth. The adrenaline and power that had sustained her began to ebb, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. Her limbs felt heavy, her eyelids difficult to keep open. What's happening? She swayed on her feet. Cassius caught her easily, lifting her into his arms. The day-death. All of our kind experience it, an irresistible pull toward unconsciousness during daylight hours. You cannot fight it, so do not try. He carried her to the bed and laid her down on silk sheets that whispered against her skin. Will you stay? The question escaped before she could stop it. Something flickered in his ancient eyes. Surprise, pleasure, but he merely nodded. I will remain until you sleep. You are safe here, Elspeth. Nothing can harm you within these walls. She wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand the tangled web of their connection, wanted to know what came next. But darkness pulled at her consciousness, more insistent with each passing moment. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Cassius sitting in a chair beside her bed, keeping vigil like some dark guardian angel. And despite everything, the death, the transformation, the uncertain future, Elspeth felt something she had not experienced in years. Peace. Chapter 4. The Blood Memory. Elspeth woke to crimson twilight and the overwhelming sense that she was not alone in her mind. Images flickered behind her eyes, memories that were not her own. A medieval battlefield strewn with corpses, a woman in Renaissance clothing laughing by candlelight, the interior of a cathedral as it burned, a child's face, terrified and pleading. And through it all, she felt him, Cassius's presence woven through every vision like a thread of dark silk. She sat up, gasping. The room was exactly as she'd left it before day sleep claimed her, but something fundamental had changed. The bond Cassius had spoken of was no longer theoretical. She could feel him like a second heartbeat, could sense his location somewhere in the manor below. Hungry. He was hungry. The knowledge came unbidden, as certain as her own needs, and beneath the hunger lay something else, loneliness so profound it made her chest ache. Impressive. Cassius's voice emerged from the shadows near the door. Most fledglings take weeks to develop such acute awareness of their sire. He stepped into the lamplight, and Elspeth's breath caught. He wore different clothing tonight. A white shirt open at the collar, black trousers, boots that made no sound on the floor. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. He looked every inch the aristocratic predator, beautiful and utterly dangerous. "I saw your memories," Elspeth said, "while I slept." The blood memory. He moved to stand beside the bed. "My blood runs in your veins now. Sometimes that creates echoes, fragments of my past bleeding into your consciousness." "The child," she whispered. "The one who was crying. Who was he?" Cassius's expression shuddered. "My son. In my mortal life, before I was turned." He sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in his ancient features. "His name was Thomas. He died of fever the winter after I became a vampire. I could not save him. My maker forbade it, said children should not be turned, that their minds could not withstand immortality. I obeyed, like a good fledgling, and I have regretted it for 5 centuries. Elspeth reached for his hand without thinking. His skin was cold, lifeless, yet somehow the touch comforted them both. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago," but his fingers tightened around hers. "Though I suppose for creatures like us, time loses its meaning. The past is always present when you carry centuries of memory." She thought of her own lost child, the baby who had died inside her before ever drawing breath. The grief was still fresh, would perhaps always be fresh now that she had eternity to remember. "Do we ever forget?" "No. That is both our gift and our curse." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a cold kiss to her knuckles. "We remember everything with perfect clarity. Every face, every voice, every moment of joy and sorrow. It accumulates like snow, layer upon layer, until you can barely recall who you were before the weight of all that history." That sounds unbearable. It can be. Many vampires succumb to madness after their first century. Their minds cannot process the accumulation of experience. Others become monsters, losing their humanity entirely in the endless hunger. His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But some of us endure. We find purpose, create meaning from the void. He met her eyes. "We search for connection, for one soul who can understand the terrible beauty of immortality." The air between them seemed to thicken. Elspeth was acutely aware of his proximity, of the way shadows gathered around him like courtiers. She could smell him, earth and time and something uniquely Cassius, and the scent made hunger stir low in her belly. Not bloodlust, a different kind of hunger entirely. "Show me more," she said suddenly. "The blood memories. I want to understand you." Cassius studied her face, searching for something. "That is an intimate thing you ask. To share centuries of memory, it creates bonds that can never be broken. We're already bound. Elspeth leaned closer. You said so yourself. Your blood is in me. I can feel you even now, your hunger and your loneliness. Show me who you were. Show me how you became this. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he extended his arm, wrist turned upward. If you truly wish to know me, drink, not to feed, but to connect. The blood carries everything, all my history, all my sins, all the years I have walked this earth. Elspeth hesitated only a heartbeat before taking his wrist in both hands. She could see the vein pulsing beneath his pale skin, could hear the slow whisper of blood through his ancient body. When she bit down, she did so gently, reverently. His blood tasted different than the blacksmith's had, colder, richer, alive with power that sang through her like electricity. And then the memories came. A young man kneeling in a chapel, praying for his dying wife. A beautiful woman with eyes like stars, offering immortality with fangs bared, the agony of transformation, bones breaking and reshaping, humanity burning away. His first kill, the terror of not being able to stop, blood soaking into cobblestones, centuries passing like pages turning, watching empires rise and fall. The day Eleanor walked into the sun, her final gift to him a smile, standing at Elspeth's window, watching her sleep, knowing he should stay away but unable to resist. The visions crashed over her in waves, drowning her in the weight of 500 years. She felt his grief, his rage, his terrible loneliness, felt the burden of immortality wearing at his soul like water against stone. And beneath it all, she felt his desire for her, a need so profound it bordered on desperation. He had not lied. Her blood called to his in ways that defied understanding, like two stars recognizing each other across the vastness of space. She pulled back, gasping. Cassius's blood stained her lips, and she licked them without thinking. "You've been alone so long," she whispered. "Yes." His voice was rough. "And you have given me hope that perhaps I will not be alone forever." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy boots, multiple pairs, the sound of men trying and failing to move quietly through the manor. Cassius was on his feet instantly, body tense as a drawn bow. Impossible. No one should be able to breach the wards. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. 3 men poured into the room, dressed in black and carrying weapons that gleamed silver in the lamplight. Vampire hunters. Elspeth recognized them from the stories her grandmother used to tell. Holy warriors sworn to destroy the undead. The leader raised a crossbow, its bolt tipped with silver and wrapped in scripture. Cassius Ravencross. By the authority of the Church and the Order of St. Michael, you are condemned to death for crimes against humanity. Cassius moved between Elspeth and the hunters with inhuman speed. The Order has no authority here. Leave now, and I will allow you to live. And who is this? The leader's gaze shifted to Elspeth. Another victim? Or your latest abomination? Neither. Cassius's voice dropped to a lethal purr. She is my queen, and if you harm her, I will make your deaths last for days. The hunter smiled coldly. Then we'll start with her. He fired. Chapter 5. The Hunter's Trial. The bolt flew toward Elspeth's heart with deadly precision. Cassius moved faster than thought, catching the silver-tipped projectile inches from her chest. The metal sizzled against his palm, burning through flesh, but he didn't flinch. He simply crushed the bolt between his fingers and let the pieces fall. That, he said softly, was a mistake. He was upon them before they could reload. Elspeth watched in horrified fascination as Cassius became something other than the contemplative creature who had shared his memories moments before. This was the apex predator, 5 centuries of accumulated power unleashed in a blur of violence. The first hunter died with his throat torn out. The second managed to draw a silver blade before Cassius broke his neck with a casual twist. The leader, the one who had fired at Elspeth, backed toward the door, fingers fumbling for a vial at his belt. "Holy water won't save you," Cassius said, stalking forward. Blood stained his mouth, and his eyes had gone completely black. "Nothing will save you." "Wait," Elspeth said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Don't kill him." Cassius froze mid-step. The bond between them flared, and she felt his confusion mixing with bloodlust. "He tried to murder you." "I know, but if you kill him, more will come. The church will send an army." She moved to stand beside Cassius, stepping over the corpses without hesitation. Her vampire nature accepted the carnage as natural, necessary. Let him deliver a message instead. The hunter stared at them both, crossbow held in shaking hands. Up close, Elspeth could see he was young, barely 20, with a zealot's fervor burning in his eyes. He reeked of fear and misplaced faith. "What message?" Cassius asked, never taking his gaze from the hunter. "That raven cross is under new protection." Elspeth let her fangs extend fully, knowing how she must look, a newly turned vampire, with blood hunger in her eyes and her sire's power humming through her veins. "Tell your order that Cassius Ravencross has taken a consort. Tell them that any who threaten us will face not one immortal, but two. Tell them—" She smiled without warmth. "Tell them the age of hunting us like animals is over." The hunter's crossbow clattered to the floor. "You're mad. The church will never—" "The church is dying," Cassius interrupted smoothly. "Your order holds less power with each passing decade. How many hunters remain? 50? 30? Meanwhile, there are thousands of us in the shadows, growing stronger while you cling to ancient superstitions." He picked up one of the silver blades and examined it with academic interest. "This is beautiful craftsmanship. 15th century, if I'm not mistaken. A pity your skills haven't evolved in 400 years. He threw the blade. It embedded itself in the wall, inches from the hunter's head. "Run," Cassius commanded. "Tell your masters that Cassius of Ravencross offers a treaty. We will not hunt in your territories, will not feed where your watchers patrol. In exchange, you will leave us in peace. If they refuse—" His smile was all teeth. "Then I will personally visit your cathedral and show you what 5 centuries of accumulated power can do to stone and flesh." The hunter fled, practically stumbling over himself in his haste to escape. His footsteps echoed through the manor, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the drip of blood from Cassius's wounded hand. Elspeth knelt beside one of the corpses, studying the hunter's face. He looked peaceful in death, despite the violence of his end. Young, barely older than she had been. Did they suffer? No, I was merciful. Cassius moved to her side. Though they did not deserve mercy, they came to murder us both. I know, She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the strange mix of emotions churning through her. Guilt for the deaths, yes, but also satisfaction that the threat had been eliminated, pride that Cassius had protected her so fiercely, and beneath it all, a dark thrill at the display of violence. Was this what it meant to be a vampire? To feel multiple truths simultaneously, humanity and monstrosity existing in uncomfortable harmony? You are conflicted, Cassius observed. That is good. Those who embrace the darkness too eagerly become monsters. Those who cling too desperately to their humanity go mad. You must find balance between the two. How? Elspeth stood, wiping blood from her hands onto her borrowed gown. How do I reconcile what I was with what I've become? With time, with practice, with... He reached up to cup her face. With support from one who has walked this path before you. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Elspeth realized she was trembling, not from fear, but from the intensity of everything she'd experienced in the past few hours. The blood, memories, the attack, the casual violence of Cassius defending her, the growing certainty that she was falling into something far more dangerous than vampire hunters. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "About my balance, my adjustment. You said yourself you're selfish. Why not just mold me into whatever companion you desire?" Cassius's expression softened in a way she hadn't seen before. "Because I have done that before. with Eleanor, with Catherine before her. I tried to shape them into perfect reflections of my desires, and they either broke or fled. I will not make that mistake again. His other hand came up so he held her face between his palms. You are not a creation, Elspeth, not a possession. You are your own being, and I would have you choose this existence. Choose me, freely, even if it takes centuries. And if I choose to leave? The question was rhetorical. She could feel the bond between them, knew instinctively that separating would be agony for them both. But she needed to hear his answer. Then I will let you go. The words clearly cost him. I will give you gold, protection, whatever you need to establish yourself in the world. I will not cage you, Elspeth. That would defeat the entire purpose. She believed him, could feel the truth resonating through their bond. Whatever else Cassius might be, predator, killer, ancient monster, he meant what he said. I'm not going anywhere, she said finally. Not yet. I have too many questions. Too much to learn. She paused. And I'm curious about this bond between us, about what we might become to each other, given time. Hunger flashed in his eyes, not for blood, but for something far more primal. Dangerous words, wife of darkness. Perhaps I'm feeling dangerous. Elspeth surprised herself with the boldness, but why not? She was immortal now, dead to the world she'd known. What did she have to lose by embracing this strange new existence? Cassius made a sound low in his throat, half laugh, half growl. You will be the death of me yet. I thought you were already dead. Undead. There is a difference. He released her face, but took her hand instead, lacing their fingers together. Come. Dawn approaches, and we need to dispose of these bodies before we rest. The hunters will return eventually, but perhaps not for a few decades if we're fortunate. They spent the next hour cleaning the evidence of violence from the bedroom. Cassius showed her how to move the corpses, how to scrub blood from wood and fabric, how to hide the signs of their nature. It was practical, even domestic in a macabre way. By the time they finished, the sky beyond the curtains was beginning to lighten. Elspeth felt the pull toward day sleep growing stronger, her limbs heavy with supernatural exhaustion. Will you stay again? She asked as Cassius guided her back to the bed. Until I sleep? Always. He settled into the chair beside her, and she noticed for the first time that he looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, as if the violence had drained something from his ancient soul. Cassius? Yes? Thank you for protecting me, for not treating me like a helpless thing. He smiled, genuine and warm. You were never helpless, Elspeth. Even as a mortal locked away to die, you were never helpless. You simply needed someone to see your strength. She wanted to respond, wanted to explore the feelings blooming between them like night flowers, but darkness claimed her, pulling her down into the dreamless sleep of the undead. The last thing she felt was Cassius's hand finding hers in the gloom, holding on as if she were the only real thing in his centuries of existence. Chapter 6. The Covenant Unveiled. 3 nights later, Elspeth discovered the portrait. She'd been exploring Ravencross during the evening hours, while Cassius attended to estate business, something about ensuring their property boundaries were properly documented to avoid questions from the village. The manor was a labyrinth of corridors and hidden rooms, each more mysterious than the last. The portrait gallery was on the 3rd floor, access through a door that had appeared locked until she touched the handle. Inside, hundreds of paintings lined the walls, faces from across the centuries, rendered in oils that had somehow retained their vibrancy despite their age. But it was the painting at the far end that froze her in place. A woman stared back at her from the canvas, auburn-haired, gray-eyed, with features that could have been Elspeth's own. The resemblance was uncanny. Not identical, but close enough that they might have been sisters. The woman wore a gown from the Renaissance period and held a single red rose. Her name was Isabeau. Cassius's voice came from the doorway. She was the first. Elspeth turned to find him leaning against the frame, expression unreadable. The first what? The first woman whose blood resonated with mine. The first I turned out of longing rather than necessity. He moved to stand beside her, studying the portrait with ancient eyes. I met her in 1542 in the court of King Francis. She was a lady-in-waiting, married to a minor noble who cared more for his mistresses than his wife. When I tasted her blood at a masquerade, just a drop from a cut finger, I knew I had found something precious. Jealousy twisted through Elspeth, sharp and unexpected. Did you love her? I thought I did. But looking back across the centuries, I think I love the possibility of her more than the woman herself. He gestured to other portraits along the wall. Catherine, turned in 1698. Eleanor, 1803. Marguerite, 1891. Each time I encountered that blood resonance, I convinced myself I'd found my eternal companion. Each time I was wrong. Elspeth studied the faces, all beautiful, all bearing some subtle resemblance to her own features. What happened to them? Isabeau went mad within a year, began slaughtering entire villages. I had to destroy her. His voice remained level, but she felt anguish ripple through their bond. Catherine betrayed me to hunters, as I told you. Marguerite simply left one night, said she wanted to explore the world without me. I haven't seen her in over a century. And Eleanor walked into the sun. Yes? Cassius touched Eleanor's portrait gently. She lasted the longest, nearly 100 years, but eventually the weight of immortality crushed her. She said she missed growing old, missed the natural progression of life. The last thing she told me was that eternity without change is just another form of death. Elspeth absorbed this, feeling the weight of his accumulated grief. 500 years of seeking connection, only to watch each companion leave or fall into darkness. Why do you think it will be different with me? I don't know if it will be. He turned to face her fully. That's the truth, Elspeth. I don't know. Perhaps the blood resonance is nothing more than biological compatibility, a quirk of chemistry that has no bearing on emotional connection. Perhaps I'm doomed to repeat this cycle forever, turning women who resemble each other, hoping the next will be the one who stays. That's a bleak perspective. I've lived a bleak existence. He took her hand, thumb tracing over her knuckles. But there's something different about you, something I can't quite articulate. When I shared my memories through blood, you didn't flinch from the darkness. When hunters attacked, you strategized rather than panicking. You adapt to immortality with a grace the others lacked. Or perhaps I'm just better at hiding my fear. His lips quirked. Perhaps. But I find myself hoping... He trailed off, looking almost vulnerable. I find myself hoping you might be the one who proves Eleanor wrong. That eternity doesn't have to be a form of death if the right companion walks it with you. Elspeth's heart, if she still possessed such a thing, twisted at his honesty. This ancient predator, capable of such violence and darkness, was offering her something precious. His genuine self, stripped of pretense. Show me, she said suddenly, the covenant, the actual ritual that binds vampire pairs together. I want to understand what we're truly building. Cassius's eyes widened fractionally. That is not a decision to make lightly. The covenant ritual is irreversible. It would link us beyond the sire-fledgling bond, would make us two halves of a single entity. Our souls would intertwine, our powers merge. We would feel each other's pain, share each other's hungers, be incapable of existing apart for long. I know, but I want to see it, to understand what lies at the end of this path we're walking. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Come. Cassius led her deeper into the manor, descending stone steps that spiraled into the earth. The air grew colder, thicker, filled with the scent of ancient dust and older magic. They passed through passages carved with symbols Elspeth didn't recognize, runes and sigils that seemed to pulse with their own dark light. Finally, they emerged into a circular chamber. The walls were covered in murals depicting vampire history, the first turning, the great wars between covens, the formation of bloodhouses. In the center stood an altar of black marble, its surface etched with intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is the Sanctum Noctis, Cassius explained. "The Sacred Heart of Ravencross. Every vampire house has one. A place where blood magic is practiced, where the deepest rituals occur." Elspeth approached the altar, drawn by something she couldn't name. When she touched the marble, power surged up her arm like lightning. "What is this?" "The accumulated essence of every vampire who has performed a covenant here. Their power, their commitment, their choice to bind themselves eternally to another." He joined her at the altar. The covenant ritual requires blood from both parties, mixed and consumed while speaking ancient vows. Once completed, the bond becomes unbreakable. You would feel me as clearly as your own heartbeat. Distance would cause physical pain. My death would likely kill you, and vice versa. And the benefits? Shared power, shared consciousness when desired, the ability to find each other across any distance, an intimacy beyond anything mortals can imagine. His hand covered hers on the marble. But also loss of individual autonomy in some ways. You would never truly be alone again. My presence would always exist at the edge of your awareness. Elspeth closed her eyes, trying to imagine such existence. The bond they shared now was already intense. She could feel Cassius's emotions bleeding into her own, could sense his location, his hunger, his desires. A full covenant would magnify that 1,000-fold. Part of her recoiled from the idea. She'd spent her mortal life under the thumb of others, her father, her husband, the Ashford family. The thought of binding herself so completely to another being, even one she was beginning to care for, triggered ancient fears. But another part, the part that had accepted immortality, that had felt Cassius's loneliness through their blood connection, yearned for it, to never be alone, to have someone who understood her completely, who she understood in return, to build something that could last centuries. "I'm not ready," she said finally, opening her eyes. "Not yet. I barely know you, barely know myself as a vampire, but I want..." She turned to face him. "I want to build toward it, to see if what we have is real or just the echo of blood calling to blood." Relief and disappointment warred in Cassius's expression. A wise decision. The covenant should never be rushed. Too many vampires bind themselves in the first flush of bloodlust, only to spend eternity regretting it. "Will you be patient with me? Let me grow into this existence before I make such a commitment. I have waited 5 centuries already." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I can wait a few years more." They stood together in the sanctum, surrounded by the weight of vampire history and the potential of their shared future. Elspeth felt the pull of the covenant magic, the altar's whisper, promising connection beyond imagining. But she also felt the strength of her own will, newly awakened by immortality. She was no longer the abandoned wife left to die in childbirth. She was something new. Vampire, yes, but also herself. Elspeth Ravencross, if she chose to take his name, or perhaps she would forge a new identity entirely. The choice was hers now. That was what mattered most. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing me this, for being honest about what it means. Always." Cassius stepped back, giving her space. "Now come. The night is still young, and you haven't yet learned to hunt properly. Time for your education to continue." As they ascended the stairs back toward the main house, Elspeth cast one final glance at the altar. Someday, perhaps, she would return to this place, would speak the ancient vows and bind herself to Cassius completely. But that day was not today. Today, she would learn, grow, become the vampire, the woman she was meant to be. The covenant could wait for her to catch up. Chapter 7. The Blood Moon. Rising. The summons arrived on the 7th night of Elspeth's immortal life. A raven landed on Ravencross's highest tower, bearing a message sealed with blood-red wax. Cassius read it in silence, his expression darkening with each line. "What is it?" Elspeth asked from where she sat in the library, studying one of the ancient texts he'd given her on vampire history. "The Conclave." He crushed the letter in his fist. "They've called an emergency session. Attendance is mandatory." The conclave? The Vampire Council, the 13 eldest of our kind who govern our society. They meet once per decade unless circumstances warrant an earlier gathering. He tossed the ruined letter into the fireplace, where it flared with unnatural green flames. Apparently, news of your turning has reached them. They wish to assess my new fledgling. Elspeth closed the book carefully. And if they don't approve? Then they may demand I destroy you. His jaw clenched. It's their right, according to ancient law. Turning immortal requires permission from the house to which you belong. I did not seek permission. You belong to a house? House Erebus, the oldest bloodline descended from the first vampires. My maker was one of the 13. When she was destroyed 3 centuries ago, I inherited her seat. He began to pace, agitation clear in every movement. I should have anticipated this. Of course they would hear about a new turning. The vampire community is small enough that news travels quickly. Elspeth stood, moving to intercept him. Then we go. We face them together. You don't understand what you're suggesting. Cassius gripped her shoulders. The conclave are ancient beyond reckoning. Most have walked this earth for over 1,000 years. Their power is absolute, their judgment final. If they decide you're a threat, then you'll have to convince them otherwise. She covered his hands with her own. I won't hide, Cassius, and I won't let you face them alone to defend a decision we both made. Something flickered in his eyes, pride mixed with fear. You are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. But I'm also your fledgling, your creation. That makes this my responsibility as much as yours. She paused. Besides, I want to see these legendary elders for myself. Hard to believe in vampires older than medieval kingdoms until you meet one. Despite his worry, Cassius smiled. Very well. But you must follow my lead completely. Do not speak unless addressed directly. Do not make eye contact with the elders unless invited, and above all, do not challenge their authority. The conclave has destroyed rebellious fledglings for far less than disrespect. I understand. Do you? He pulled her closer. Because if something goes wrong tonight, if they decide against you, I will not let them destroy you. I will fight the entire conclave if necessary, and that fight will likely end with both our deaths. Elspeth's throat tightened at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. Then we'd better make a good impression. They traveled to the conclave meeting through shadow. Cassius revealed this new ability as they stood in Ravencross's courtyard, the power to step into darkness and emerge elsewhere, skipping across distances through the spaces between light. He wrapped his arms around Elspeth, and the world dissolved into void. When reality reformed, they stood in a vast underground chamber lit by thousands of candles. The walls were carved from obsidian, reflecting flame light like captured stars. 12 thrones arranged in a semicircle dominated the space, each occupied by a figure of terrible beauty and ancient power. No, 11 thrones were occupied. One stood empty. Cassius of House Erebus. The voice came from a vampire who appeared as a young man, but whose eyes held millennia. You stand before the conclave without summons or permission. Explain yourself. Cassius bowed, pulling Elspeth down with him. Elder Lucien, I come in response to your raven. I bring my fledgling for assessment, as is my right as a member of this body. A right you forfeited when you turned her without consulting us. This from a female vampire with skin like polished ebony and silver eyes. The laws are clear, Cassius. No member of the conclave may create a fledgling without majority approval. With respect, Elder Zahara, that law was enacted to prevent the creation of vampire armies, not to restrict personal companions. Cassius kept his tone measured, diplomatic. I turned one mortal out of necessity and desire, not as a political act. All turnings are political. A third elder spoke, this one appearing as an elderly man with a long white beard, though Elspeth could sense power rolling off him in waves. Every vampire we create strengthens our numbers and draws attention to our existence. The church hunters grow bolder with each passing year. We cannot afford carelessness. I was not careless, Elder Way. I chose a mortal whose bloodline resonates with mine, a compatibility that occurs perhaps once in 10,000 individuals. To let her die would have been a waste of potential, or an act of mercy. Elder Lucian leaned forward, studying Elspeth with eyes like chips of amber. Step forward, fledgling. Let us see what has inspired Cassius to risk his position on the conclave. Elspeth rose carefully, aware of 12 pairs of ancient eyes tracking her every movement. The weight of their combined attention was suffocating. These beings had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, had drunk from thousands of mortal throats, had accumulated power beyond imagination. She was a week-old vampire standing before the equivalent of vampire gods, but she refused to cower. "My name is Elspeth," she said clearly. "I was mortal until 7 nights ago. I accept responsibility for my transformation and understand the implications of my existence." "Do you?" Elder Zahara rose from her throne, descending the steps with liquid grace. She circled Elspeth like a predator assessing prey. "You understand that you are now subject to laws and hierarchies older than your country, that your actions reflect upon your sire and your house, that failure to control your bloodlust could bring destruction upon all our kind?" "I understand." Elspeth met the elder's silver gaze directly, ignoring Cassius's warning about eye contact. "I also understand that I didn't ask for this existence but will not squander it. Cassius turned me when I was dying. He gave me a choice, death or immortality. I chose to live." Boldly spoken. A new voice, this from a vampire who appeared as a beautiful youth with golden hair and emerald eyes. "But words mean little. Actions define us. Tell me, fledgling, have you killed?" "Only in defense. Hunters attacked Ravencross 3 nights past. They died." Murmurs rippled through the conclave. Elder Way stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Already you attract the church's attention, and already you justify murder as necessity." "It was necessary." Elspeth's hands clenched into fists. "They came to destroy Cassius and myself. I will not apologize for surviving." "Peace, child." The golden-haired vampire waved a dismissive hand. "I merely wished to see if you possessed a spine. Too many fledglings are mewling creatures, afraid of their own nature. You, at least, seem to have accepted what you are." "Perhaps too readily," Elder Zahara interjected. "Cassius, what is your true purpose with this fledgling? Do you intend the covenant ritual?" All eyes turned to Cassius. He stood motionless, expression carefully neutral. "That is between Elspeth and myself. Not when it concerns conclave members." Elder Lucien stood now, and the chamber seemed to darken in response. "The covenant binds 2 vampires eternally. If you intend such a bond, we must approve your choice of partner. The wrong companion could compromise your judgment, could sway your votes on critical matters." "My judgment is my own," Cassius said quietly, "as it has been for 5 centuries. If I choose to perform the covenant ritual, I will do so regardless of conclave approval." Silence fell, heavy and dangerous. Elder Way broke it with a dry chuckle. "There is the Cassius I remember, proud and stubborn as ever. You inherited your maker's defiant streak along with her seat." He turned to the other elders. "I propose we allow the fledgling to exist. Cassius has proven himself a responsible sire in the past, despite his complications with previous companions. Let him have this chance." "I disagree." Zahara's voice cut like a blade. "The girl is too young, too untested, and Cassius is compromised. I can sense the depth of his attachment to her. When did you last make a rational decision regarding a woman who shares your blood resonance?" "Watch your words, Zahara." Cassius's tone held warning. "Or what? You'll challenge me?" The female elder laughed. "You're powerful, Cassius, but you're not millennium old. I could reduce you to ash before you crossed half this chamber." "Perhaps." Cassius moved to stand beside Elspeth. "But you'd have to destroy us both. And I wonder if the Conclave is prepared for the civil war that would spark. House Erebus has many loyal members who would question the execution of one of the 13. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Elspeth could feel tension coiling through the bond she shared with Cassius. He was preparing for violence, ready to defend her against impossible odds. Enough. Elder Lucien's voice cracked like thunder. We will vote. Those in favor of allowing the fledgling Elspeth to exist, indicate now. Hands rose slowly, Elder Way. The golden-haired youth. 3 others Elspeth couldn't identify. 6 total. Those opposed? 4 hands, including Zahara's. The ayes have it. Lucian settled back onto his throne. Elspeth of House Erebus may exist, provisionally. She will be monitored for the next decade. Any signs of instability, any failure to control her bloodlust, and we will revisit this decision. Understood? Understood, Cassius said. And Cassius, do not make us regret this mercy. Your political capital within the conclave is not infinite. Choose your battles wisely. With that, the session ended. The elders began to disperse, some vanishing into shadow, others simply departing through hidden doors. Within moments, only Cassius, Elspeth, and Elder Lucian remained. That was dangerous, Lucian said quietly, threatening civil war over a week-old fledgling. I meant every word. Cassius took Elspeth's hand. I will not lose her. Lucian studied them both, then nodded slowly. I believe you, which is why I voted in her favor. Better to have you both alive and loyal than dead and martyred. He paused. But be careful, old friend. Zahara is right about one thing. Your judgment is compromised where this girl is concerned. Don't let passion blind you to political reality. I'll take that under advisement. They left through shadow, emerging back in Ravencross's courtyard. The moment they solidified, Elspeth's legs gave out. Cassius caught her, holding her upright as reaction set in. That was terrifying, she whispered. Yes, but you survived it. Survived the scrutiny of beings who could have killed us both with a thought. He tilted her face up. You were magnificent, Elspeth. Brave and bold and everything I hoped you could be. I nearly started a war. You nearly started a necessary war. The conclave has grown complacent, too comfortable in their power. Perhaps it's time someone reminded them that loyalty must be earned, not demanded. Elspeth leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. The bond between them hummed with shared relief and lingering adrenaline. They had survived. The conclave had granted her provisional existence, but the threat remained. One wrong move, and she could be destroyed. No pressure, she muttered. Cassius laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Welcome to vampire politics, my darling. It only gets more complicated from here. Chapter 8. The Crimson Revelation. 2 weeks after the conclave trial, Elspeth discovered she could walk in daylight. It happened by accident. She'd been in the library when a curtain pulled loose, spilling early morning sun across the floor. Cassius screamed her name from somewhere in the manor, the bond between them flaring with terror. But the sunlight didn't burn. It touched her skin with warmth instead of fire, turned her pale flesh golden instead of ash. Elspeth stood frozen, staring at her sun-touched hand in disbelief. Cassius burst through the door, prepared to drag her to safety. He stopped dead, eyes widening at the impossible sight. How? The word came out strangled. I don't know. Elspeth flexed her fingers, watching light dance across them. It should be burning me, but it's just warm. Cassius approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows. When he reached toward the sunlight, his fingers began to smoke immediately. He jerked back with a hiss of pain. This shouldn't be possible. Daywalking is a myth. Even the eldest vampires cannot withstand true sunlight. He circled her, studying her from every angle. Unless what? Your bloodline. He grabbed her shoulders, excitement and fear warring in his expression. The resonance between your blood and mine, I thought it was simply compatibility. But what if it's something more? What if your ancestry carries something that makes you immune? My family wasn't special. We were minor gentry, nothing more. That you know of. Cassius was already moving toward the bookshelves, pulling down ancient tomes. But bloodlines have power, Elspeth. Certain families carry traits that skip generations: psychic sensitivity, immunity to compulsion, the ability to see through vampire glamours, and, in extremely rare cases. He opened a massive volume, flipping through pages covered in cramped script. The Gift of Daylight. Elspeth joined him, reading over his shoulder. The text was in Latin, but somehow she could understand it. Another vampire gift, the ability to comprehend languages instantly. And there existed among the children of night a legend of the Solaris bloodline, mortals whose essence contained a spark of the divine sun. When turned, these rare souls retained their immunity to daylight's curse, becoming bridges between the mortal and immortal realms. This was written in 856, Cassius said softly, by a vampire who claimed to have encountered a daywalker in Byzantium. She lived for 3 centuries before being destroyed by jealous elders who feared her power. You think I'm one of these Solaris descendants? I think it's the only explanation. He closed the book. The question is whether this trait makes you invaluable or a target. The Conclave would kill for a daywalking vampire. Imagine the strategic advantage. No longer bound by darkness, able to move freely in human society. Elspeth's mind raced. A week ago, she'd been a newly turned vampire learning to hunt and feed. Now she was apparently a legendary creature from vampire mythology. What do? We keep this secret. Cassius pulled the curtain closed, plunging the room back into comfortable darkness. Tell no one. Not other vampires, not the Conclave, not even servants. If word spreads that you can walk in daylight, you'll become the most hunted creature in existence. Both vampires and hunters will want to capture you, study you, use you. But surely daywalking is a gift, something to celebrate? In a perfect world, yes. But vampire society is built on shared vulnerability. We're all equally trapped by the sun, equally bound by night. You break that fundamental rule. Some will see you as evolution, others will see you as a threat to the natural order. He cupped her face. I will not lose you to their fear and jealousy. So I just pretend? Act as if sunlight would kill me? Yes. At least until you're strong enough to defend yourself against those who would use or destroy you. A decade, perhaps 2. Let them forget about the Conclave trial. Let you become just another vampire in the shadows. Elspeth nodded, though frustration burned through her. To possess such a gift and be forced to hide it felt wrong. But she trusted Cassius's judgment. He'd survived 5 centuries by understanding vampire politics. There's something else, Cassius said hesitantly. If you can walk in daylight, you may possess other gifts as well. The Solaris bloodline was said to carry multiple abilities: immunity to holy symbols, resistance to silver, the power to create life instead of just taking it. Create life? Vampires are dead. How could we? She stopped as understanding dawned. And though the baby, the child I lost before you turned me, could I have carried it to term? Unlikely. Your mortal body was already failing. But as a vampire with Solaris blood? Perhaps. He looked away. There are legends of daywalkers who could bear children. Half-vampire offspring who aged normally but possessed vampiric gifts, but they're just legends, Elspeth. Stories told to comfort immortals who grieve their lost humanity. Elspeth's hand drifted to her flat stomach, touching the place where life had briefly existed. A child. The one thing she'd wanted desperately in her mortal life. The one thing vampire nature should make impossible. Could she really be capable of such a miracle? Don't think about it, Cassius advised gently. The hope would be too painful if it proves false. Focus on mastering your current abilities first. Daywalking alone will require practice. You need to learn your limits. Test how much sun exposure you can tolerate. Understand how your body differs from typical vampires. Will you help me? Of course, but carefully and in secret. We'll wait for cloudy days, dawn, and dusk when the light is weak. No one can see you practicing this gift. They spent the next hour in the library, Cassius quizzing her on vampire lore and discussing what her unique nature might mean. But beneath the academic conversation, Elspeth felt something shift between them. She was no longer just his fledgling, no longer simply a woman who shared his blood resonance. She was something unprecedented, something powerful, and that changed everything. The assassination attempt came 3 nights later. Elspeth woke to the sound of shattering glass and Cassius's roar of fury through their bond. She moved with vampire speed, reaching the parlor to find him locked in combat with another vampire, a female with ice-blonde hair and eyes like frozen sapphires. "You should have destroyed her when the Conclave gave you the chance," the stranger hissed, dodging Cassius's strike. "Now I'll do it for you and claim the reward." "Zahara sent you." It wasn't a question. "The Elder understands what you're too blind to see. The fledgling is dangerous, unnatural." The assassin's gaze flicked to Elspeth. "She reeks of old magic, of bloodlines that should have died out centuries ago. Better to eliminate her now before she becomes a true threat." Elspeth felt fury ignite in her chest. This vampire, this stranger, presumed to judge her worth, to decide she should die for the crime of being different? No. Power surged through her veins, hot and unfamiliar. The room brightened impossibly, not from lamps or candles, but from her. Light poured from Elspeth's skin, golden and fierce as midday sun. The assassin screamed. She thrashed backward, flesh smoking where the light touched. Cassius shielded his own, eyes pressing himself against the wall to avoid the radiance. "Stop!" he shouted. "Elspeth, control it!" But Elspeth couldn't stop. The light poured from her in waves, driven by rage and instinct. The assassin collapsed, body burning from within, until she was nothing but ash on the carpet. The light faded as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving Elspeth gasping in the sudden darkness. "What did I do?" she whispered. Cassius lowered his arm cautiously. His eyes held awe and fear in equal measure. "You weaponized your daylight immunity, turned it into a tool of destruction." He approached slowly. The legends were true. Solaris vampires don't just walk in sun. They become the sun when threatened. Elspeth stared at the pile of ash that had been a living vampire moments before. She'd killed with nothing but the light in her blood. The power terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "Zahara will know now," she said. "The assassin was her agent. When she doesn't return, the secret is out." Cassius pulled her into his arms. "And we have very little time before the Conclave demands answers." "What do we do?" "We prepare for war." He tilted her face up, eyes burning with determination. "Because if they want to destroy you, they'll have to go through me first, and I am done playing by their rules." Chapter 9. The Covenant's Call. The Conclave arrived at dawn. Not all 12. That would have been a declaration of total war. But 4 elders manifested in Ravencross's courtyard as the sun crept over the horizon. Lucien, Zahara, Way, and the golden-haired youth who called himself Aurelius. Cassius met them on the steps, with Elspeth standing defiantly at his side despite the danger. If they meant to destroy her, she would face them with dignity. "We felt the death of Zahara's agent," Elder Lucian said without preamble. "A vampire destroyed by light that wasn't the sun. Explain." "Your colleague sent an assassin to murder my fledgling without sanction or trial," Cassius replied coldly. "I consider that a declaration of hostilities against House Erebus." Elspeth defended herself. "The agent's death is on Zahara's conscience." "I acted to protect vampire society," Zahara snapped. "The girl is an abomination. She carries the Solaris bloodline. Do you understand what that means? She could destroy us all." "Or protect us all," Elder Way interjected mildly. The Solaris vampires were never inherently destructive. Legend says they served as mediators between our kind and mortals, capable of walking in both worlds. Legend also says they grew too powerful and had to be purged. Zahara's eyes blazed. "There's a reason none have existed for 8 centuries, Way. Our ancestors recognized the threat they posed. Or perhaps our ancestors feared what they couldn't control." Aurelius circled Elspeth, studying her with open curiosity. "Show us, Daywalker. Prove you're more than a tale told to frighten fledglings." Elspeth glanced at Cassius. He nodded. "Fractionally. They had little choice now. She stepped away from the manor's shadow and into the direct path of the rising sun. The elders collectively flinched, waiting for her to burst into flame. Instead, Elspeth tilted her face toward the light. The sun warmed her skin, turned her hair to copper gold, made her undead flesh glow as if alive. She was beautiful and terrible in the dawn, a vampire who defied nature's most fundamental rule. Impossible, Zahara breathed. Magnificent, Wei corrected. Elder Lucien approached until he stood at the very edge of the shadow. Can you control the light, or does it only manifest in combat? I'm still learning. Elspeth raised her hand, and golden light began to pool in her palm. Not the violent explosion that had destroyed the assassin, but a controlled radiance. But yes, I can summon it at will now. This changes everything. Lucien looked to his fellow elders. A day-walking vampire who can weaponize sunlight. She could be our greatest asset or our most dangerous enemy. We must decide how to proceed. Kill her now while we have the chance, Zahara argued, before she grows too powerful to stop. Or recruit her. Aurelia smiled. Imagine what House Erebus could achieve with such power. Imagine what we could achieve if she swore fealty to the Conclave. She already has loyalties. Cassius moved to stand beside Elspeth, his hand finding hers. And I will not allow you to use her as a weapon in vampire politics. You don't have a choice, Zahara said flatly. The girl is too dangerous to exist independently. Either she submits to Conclave authority, or we destroy her. And you with her, if necessary. The threat hung in the morning air. Elspeth felt Cassius's fury through their bond, felt him preparing to fight even though it meant death. She couldn't let it come to that. I have a third option, she said clearly. All eyes turned to her. I will submit to testing. 1 year of observation by the Conclave. Prove I can control my abilities. Prove I'm not the threat Zahara believes me to be. She squeezed Cassius's hand, silently asking him to trust her. In exchange, you leave Cassius alone. No punishment for my creation, no sanctions against House Erebus. Whatever judgment you pass, it falls on me alone. Elspeth, no. It's the only way. She turned to face him. They'll never stop hunting us otherwise. Let me prove I'm trustworthy. 1 year, and then they'll see I'm not a monster. Cassius's jaw clenched. And if they decide against you at the end of that year, then I'll face whatever judgment comes, but at least you'll be safe. Unacceptable. He whirled on the elders. You want her power? Fine, but there's a price. The covenant ritual. You let us complete the bond, legally, with Conclave approval, and we'll both submit to your authority. 2 bound vampires are easier to control than 1 rogue daywalker. The elders exchanged glances. Elder Wei stroked his beard thoughtfully. The covenant would make you both vulnerable to each other. If we needed to eliminate one, the other would follow. A built-in failsafe. Precisely. Cassius's voice remained steady, but Elspeth could feel desperation bleeding through their bond. We bind ourselves together and to the Conclave's laws. In exchange, you allow us to exist without constant threat of execution. Elder Lucien considered. The covenant requires both parties to consent freely. Elspeth, do you agree to this arrangement, knowing that binding yourself to Cassius means sharing his fate? If we destroy him, you die as well? Elspeth looked at the vampire who had saved her life, who had defended her before ancient powers, who was now offering to bind their souls together to keep her safe. In his eyes, she saw 5 centuries of loneliness, desperate hope, and something that might be love. The covenant was permanent, irreversible. Once completed, they would be 2 halves of a single being. But wasn't that already becoming true? Didn't she feel most complete when he was near? Didn't the thought of existing without him cause physical pain? Yes, she said firmly. I consent to the covenant. Zahara hissed in displeasure, but Elder Lucien nodded. Very well. We will permit the ritual under conclave observation. If completed successfully, you will both be bound to each other and to our laws. Violate those laws, and we destroy you both. Understood? Understood, Cassius agreed. The ritual will take place in 3 days, at the next full moon. We will reconvene at Ravencross's Sanctum Noctis." Lucien turned to depart, the other elders following, but he paused at the courtyard gates. "Cassius, you're making a bold gambit. I hope she's worth it." "She is," Cassius said without hesitation. The elders vanished into shadow, leaving Cassius and Elspeth alone in the rising sun, or at least Elspeth in the sun. Cassius remained in the shadows, separated from her by the deadly light. "You shouldn't have agreed to this," he said quietly. "The covenant is permanent. If you have any doubts, I don't." Elspeth stepped back into shadow so she could touch him. "I felt your loneliness through our bond, Cassius. 500 years of searching for connection. And I felt my own emptiness filled by your presence. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe we should have waited. But I know one truth. I don't want to exist without you. Even if it means being bound to a monster? You're not a monster. You're just immortal." She smiled. "There's a difference." Cassius pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. 3 days, and then we'll be bound for eternity. I know. No going back, no changing your mind. Whatever we become, together or apart, will be decided by that ritual. I know, she repeated, and I'm ready. They stood together in the threshold between darkness and light, between their individual existence and their merged future. The covenant would transform them both in ways they couldn't fully predict. But Elspeth was no longer afraid. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. Chapter 10. The Eternal Binding. The full moon rose over Ravencross like a pearl in black velvet. The Sanctum Noctis glowed with otherworldly light. Hundreds of candles arranged in precise patterns, their flames casting dancing shadows across the obsidian walls. The 12 conclave elders formed a circle around the altar, witnesses to the covenant ritual that would bind Cassius and Elspeth for eternity. Elspeth wore a gown of deep crimson silk that pooled around her feet like spilled blood. Her hair had been woven with night-blooming jasmine, the flower's scent mingling with the incense that filled the chamber. She looked like a bride preparing for a wedding, or a sacrifice. Cassius stood opposite her at the altar, dressed in black save for a silver chain around his throat, the only metal vampire tradition permitted in the sacred space. His expression was carefully neutral, but Elspeth could feel his emotions churning through their bond: anticipation, fear, desperate hope. Elder Lucien stepped forward, holding an ancient dagger whose blade seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "We are gathered to witness the covenant of blood between Cassius of House Erebus and Elspeth, fledgling of his making. This ritual is irreversible. Once completed, their souls will be bound across time and space, unable to exist separately. Do you both still consent?" "I consent," Cassius said clearly. "I consent," Elspeth echoed. "Then let the ritual begin." Lucien handed the dagger to Cassius. The blood of the sire first, offered freely as a gift. Cassius drew the blade across his palm without hesitation. Dark blood welled up, and he let it drip into an obsidian chalice that sat on the altar. The liquid seemed to glow with its own internal light. The blood of the fledgling second, offered freely as acceptance. Elspeth took the dagger with steady hands. The blade was cold as winter stone. She cut her own palm, feeling the sharp sting, and added her blood to the chalice. Where the two bloods met, they began to swirl together, not mixing, but dancing around each other in intricate patterns. "Drink now, and speak the ancient vows." Cassius lifted the chalice first. His eyes never left Elspeth's as he spoke. "I, Cassius, born in mortal days as Cassius Whitmore, made immortal by night's embrace, do bind myself to you, Elspeth. I offer you my power, my protection, my eternity. Let my strength become your strength. Let my soul become entwined with yours. From this night forward, your pain is my pain, your joy is my joy, your death is my death. I choose you, eternally and without reservation." He drank deeply from the chalice, then held it out to Elspeth. Her hands trembled only slightly as she took it. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. Once she spoke the vows and drank, there would be no escape. She would be bound to Cassius forever, their fates merged into a single thread. But as she looked into his eyes, those ancient, sorrowful, desperately hopeful eyes, doubt evaporated. I, Elspeth, born mortal as Elspeth Ashford, reborn immortal through your gift, do bind myself to you, Cassius. I offer you my loyalty, my trust, my forever. Let my light complement your darkness. Let my soul become entwined with yours. From this night forward, your pain is my pain, your joy is my joy, your death is my death. I choose you, eternally and without reservation. She drank, and the world exploded. The blood burned down her throat like liquid fire, but the physical sensation was nothing compared to what followed. The bond between them, already strong, became absolute. Elspeth could feel Cassius inside her mind, not as an intruder, but as an essential part of her being. His memories flooded her consciousness. 5 centuries of existence, countless faces, endless nights, but also his emotions, laid bare without possibility of deception. He loved her, truly, deeply, with the desperation of someone who had searched for 500 years and finally found home, and she loved him back. When had that happened? Somewhere between the blood memories and the conclave trial, between the assassination attempt and this moment of binding, love had taken root. The candles flared brighter, flames reaching toward the vaulted ceiling. Power swirled through the sanctum, ancient magic responding to the completed ritual. Elspeth felt something fundamental shift inside her, as if pieces she hadn't known were scattered, had suddenly clicked into place. Mine. Cassius's voice in her mind, intimate as a touch. Forever mine. Yours, she agreed. And you are mine. The elders began to withdraw their power, the ritual circle dissolving. Elder Lucian regarded them both with something that might have been approval. It is done. You are bound by blood and soul, covenant joined, until true death claims you both. May you never regret this choice. Elspeth barely heard him. She was too focused on the sensation of Cassius's consciousness merged with her own, on the way she could feel his heartbeat, or the memory of it, echoing in her chest. They were still separate beings, but also somehow one entity split across 2 bodies. How do you feel? Cassius asked aloud, though he could surely sense her emotions through their bond. Complete, she answered honestly, as if I've been missing a piece of myself and only just found it. He crossed to her, cupping her face in both hands. I have waited 5 centuries for this moment. To be truly known by another, to share my existence with someone who understands both the beauty and the horror of immortality. His thumb traced her lower lip. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for saving me. She leaned into his touch, for seeing something in me worth transforming, worth binding yourself to forever. I saw everything, he murmured. Your strength, your spirit, your refusal to accept the death they'd planned for you. I saw the woman you could become if given the chance. And you've exceeded every hope. The elders had departed, leaving them alone in the sanctum. The candles continued to burn, casting golden light across obsidian walls, creating an intimate space at the heart of Ravencross. Cassius pulled Elspeth closer until their bodies aligned, her head tucked beneath his chin. Through the bond, she could feel his contentment, his bone-deep relief that the covenant was complete and she was truly, irrevocably his. What happens now? She asked. Now we exist, together as we were meant to. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. We hunt together, learn together, face whatever comes together. The conclave will watch us for the promised year, but they cannot separate us now. The covenant makes that impossible. And after the year? After? We have eternity, Elspeth. Eternity to explore this bond, to master your Solaris gifts, to build something that lasts beyond the reach of time. His arms tightened around her. I will teach you everything I know. We will travel the world if you wish, or remain here in Ravencross. We will face the dawn together, you in the light, me in shadow, but always together. Elspeth closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the warmth of their merged consciousness. She could feel his memories as clearly as her own now, could access 5 centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience. But more importantly, she could feel his emotions without filter or pretense. This was covenant. This was the eternal binding vampire lore had spoken of in hushed tones. 2 souls becoming one while remaining distinct, a paradox made manifest through blood and magic. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered, "of immortality, of the conclave, of what I've become. As long as you're with me, I can face anything." "Then you understand what I've known since the moment I tasted your blood." Cassius tilted her face up, eyes burning with ancient fire. "We were meant for this, meant for each other. Across time and space, and the barriers between mortality and eternity, we were always destined to find each other." He kissed her then, and it was like nothing Elspeth had experienced before. Not the desperate hunger of feeding, not the tentative exploration of attraction. This was souls recognizing their perfect complement. She could taste 500 years of loneliness in that kiss, could feel the moment it transformed into joy. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, despite not needing to breathe. "Take me home," Elspeth said softly, "to our home, our eternity." Cassius smiled, genuine, unguarded, beautiful. "As you wish, my queen." They left the sanctum hand in hand, ascending from the earth's depths to the manor above. Outside, the moon hung low and enormous, bathing Ravencross in silver light. Tomorrow, Elspeth would greet the dawn, while Cassius watched from darkness. But tonight, they had shadows to share. Tonight, and every night for the rest of forever. Chapter 11, Eternal Dawn. 6 months later, Elspeth stood at the cliff's edge, watching the sun rise over the ocean. This had become her ritual, greeting the dawn while Cassius rested in Ravencross's deepest chambers, connected to her through the covenant even in his day sleep. She could feel him now, distantly, his consciousness quiet but present, a constant warmth at the back of her mind. The past months had been a revelation. The Conclave's promised year of observation had proven surprisingly uneventful. Without Zahara's interference, the Elder had been censured for sending the assassin. The other vampires seemed content to let the covenant-bound pair exist in peace. Occasional check-ins from Elder Lucian, progress reports delivered to the Conclave, but nothing overtly threatening. In that time, Elspeth had learned to master her Solaris gifts. She could summon light at will now, could weaponize it or simply use it to illuminate darkness. The sun no longer just failed to harm her. She drew power from it, storing daylight in her blood to share with Cassius during their shared hunts at twilight. More surprisingly, she discovered other abilities. Plants bloomed at her touch. Small wounds healed faster when she focused light on them. And once, when a village child had been dying of fever, her blood, diluted and mixed with medicine, had saved the girl's life. Creating life instead of taking it, the Solaris gift made manifest. "You're thinking loudly again," Cassius's voice murmured through their bond. Elspeth smiled. "I thought you were sleeping." "I was. Your emotions woke me. Contentment feels better than any rest." A pause. "Join me?" "The sun's barely risen." "I know, but I miss you." The simple honesty melted her. Even after 6 months of constant proximity, Cassius still craved her presence the way some vampires craved blood. The covenant had made them inseparable in truth. Any time apart caused a low-level ache, a wrongness in the world's fabric. Elspeth turned from the sunrise and made her way back to Ravencross. The manor had become home in ways Blackthorn never had. Here, she wasn't the unwanted wife or the dying mother. She was Elspeth of House Erebus, covenant-bound mate to one of the 13 day-walking vampire, Solaris descended. She was powerful, she was loved, she was free. She found Cassius in their shared chambers, stretched across the 4-poster bed they'd commissioned together. Even in the total darkness he required during day hours, she could see him perfectly. 500 years old and beautiful as sin, watching her with eyes that held infinite patience and very finite restraint. "Come here," he commanded softly. Elspeth moved to the bed, letting him pull her down against him. His skin was cool from the day sleep, but warmed where it touched hers. She'd learned to share her solar heat with him through the bond, making intimacy more comfortable for them both. 6 months, Cassius murmured against her hair. 6 months since we bound our souls. Sometimes I still can't believe you're real. I'm very real. She pressed closer, feeling his arms tighten around her. And I'm not going anywhere. I know. The covenant ensures that. But I mean... He paused, searching for words. I thought I understood loneliness. 5 centuries of existing without true connection, watching companions leave or fall or fade. But I didn't understand the opposite, how profound not being alone could feel. Every moment with you is a revelation. Elspeth felt tears prick her eyes. She'd cried more as a vampire than she ever had as a mortal. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming intensity of emotions she was finally free to feel. I love you, she said simply. I know we've said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I love you, Cassius, completely, eternally. And I love you. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. My salvation, my queen, my eternity. They lay together in comfortable silence, their minds partially merged through the covenant. Elspeth could feel his contentment, his residual fear that this happiness might be stolen, his growing certainty that perhaps, finally, he'd found something permanent. Elder Lucien sent word yesterday, Cassius said eventually. The year of observation is nearly complete. He believes the conclave will declare us fully autonomous. No more check-ins, no more restrictions. We'll be free to exist as we choose. That's good news. It is. But there's a condition. He propped himself up on one elbow. They want to establish you as an official House representative, a bridge between vampire society and mortal world. Your daywalking makes you valuable for certain diplomatic missions. Elspeth considered this. They want to use me. Yes, but on your terms. You'd have autonomy to accept or refuse assignments, and they're offering protection in exchange. No vampire would dare threaten a conclave representative. What do you think? Cassius traced patterns on her shoulder. I think it's a fair arrangement. We'd maintain our independence while gaining political security. But it's your choice, Elspeth. I won't pressure you into service. She thought of the child she'd saved with her blood, of the potential good she could do with her unique abilities. Vampire society had always existed as predators in the shadows. What if she could change that? Build connections between the immortal and mortal realms. Use her gifts for something beyond survival? I'll do it, she decided. On my terms, as you said, I won't be their weapon, but I'll be their bridge. Cassius smiled. Then we tell Lucien at the next meeting. He pulled her closer. But until then, I'd like to spend the day right here, holding the woman who made eternity bearable. Flattery. Truth. He kissed her deeply, and the bond between them flared with shared warmth. You are everything I searched for across 5 centuries, Elspeth. Everything and more. She let herself sink into his embrace, into the perfect rightness of their merged consciousness. This was covenant. This was love beyond mortality's boundaries. This was forever. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bathing Ravencross in golden light. Inside, 2 vampires held each other in darkness, their souls entwined beyond death's reach. And somewhere in the depths of their merged awareness, both Cassius and Elspeth knew the same truth. They had found home, not in a place, but in each other. And no force in heaven or earth could sever that bond. The morning stretched endlessly before them, full of possibility. They had all the time in the world. Epilogue. 5 years later. The nursery at Ravencross had been Cassius's idea. It's premature, Elspeth had argued when he first proposed it. We don't even know if it's possible. The legends might be wrong. The legends have been right about everything else, he'd countered. Your daywalking, your light weapon, the enhanced healing. Why not this too? So they'd prepared the room, pale blue walls, a hand-carved cradle, windows that could flood the space with sunlight or be shuttered completely, a room that existed between darkness and light, like everything else in their lives. Now Elspeth sat in the rocking chair by the window, cradling the impossible made manifest. Her daughter, their daughter, slept peacefully in her arms, dark hair like Cassius's, but with eyes that already showed hints of gold, like sunlight through amber. She was 3 months old, growing normally as any mortal child would, but with subtle signs of her heritage, unusual strength for her age, perfect night vision, a resistance to minor injuries. A Dhampir, the old text called such children, half vampire, half mortal, born not of death, but of the Solaris bloodline's unique gift. "She's beautiful," Cassius whispered from the doorway, careful not to wake the baby. He couldn't enter during full daylight. Even after 5 years, the sun remained deadly to him. But at dusk like this, with shadows lengthening, he could stand at the threshold and watch his family. His family. After 500 years alone, he had a family. "She has your stubborn expression," Elspeth teased softly, already frowning at the world like an ancient grump. "I don't frown. You absolutely frown. It's one of your most prominent features." He laughed quietly, and the sound still made her heart lift. 5 years of covenant, and she still discovered new reasons to love him daily. "What shall we name her? We can't keep calling her little one, forever." Elspeth looked down at the sleeping infant. They'd discussed names for months, unable to agree. He'd suggested Eleanor after his longest companion. She'd suggested Catherine, her mother's name, but neither felt quite right. "Dawn," she said suddenly. "We'll call her Dawn, because she represents the future, the bridge between night and day, darkness and light, the beginning of something new." Cassius's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Dawn, it's perfect." The baby stirred, making small sounds of waking. Her eyes opened, those strange amber gold eyes, and focused immediately on Elspeth. Already, at 3 months, her gaze held unusual intelligence. "Hello, little Dawn," Elspeth murmured. "Ready to meet your father properly?" She carried the baby to the doorway where Cassius waited. The sun had set enough for him to risk extending his arms into the nursery. Elspeth placed Dawn in his embrace and watched emotion play across his ancient features. "She's real," he breathed. "I can scarcely believe it. A child. Our child." "The conclave is going to have questions," Elspeth warned. "A Dhampir hasn't been born in centuries. They'll want to study her, understand her nature." "Let them try." Cassius's voice turned protective. "They approved our covenant. They gave us autonomy. Dawn is under House Erebus protection, and I will destroy anyone who threatens her." Elspeth smiled. There's that frown again. But she understood his fierceness. Dawn represented everything they'd fought for, the right to exist on their own terms, to build something beyond mere survival, to create life instead of only taking it. The Solaris bloodline had given them this gift, and they would protect it with every ounce of immortal power they possessed. As night fell completely over Ravencross, the three of them moved to the parlor, Cassius carrying Dawn with paternal care, Elspeth following close behind. They settled together on the sofa, the baby nestled between them, a portrait of impossible domesticity. "What do you think she'll become?" Cassius wondered aloud. "Will she age like mortals? Will she develop vampire gifts? Will she choose immortality when she comes of age, or prefer mortal life?" "I don't know," Elspeth admitted. "But we'll guide her through whatever comes. Teach her to be strong, to be kind, to understand both sides of her heritage." "A bridge," Cassius murmured. "Like her mother. A bridge between worlds." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Dawn sleep, feeling the weight of their shared future. The covenant had given them eternity together. Dawn gave that eternity purpose. Outside, stars emerged in the darkening sky. Inside Ravencross, a family existed that shouldn't have been possible. A covenant-bound pair of vampires and their Dhampir daughter. Living proof that love transcended the boundaries between life and death. Elspeth leaned against Cassius, feeling his arm come around her shoulders, feeling the triple heartbeat of their merged consciousness. his cold, immortal pulse, her sun-warmed rhythm, and Dawn's strong, mortal beat. 3 hearts, 2 vampires, 1 impossible child, and all the time in the world to discover what came next. "I love you," Cassius whispered. "Both of you. My eternity." "And we love you," Elspeth replied. "Forever." In her sleep, Dawn made a sound that might have been agreement, and in the depths of Ravencross, ancient magic hummed with satisfaction, recognizing that the Solaris bloodline had finally fulfilled its purpose, to bring light into eternal darkness, to prove that even the undead could create life, to show that love, given time, could transform anything, even the cursed, into something beautiful. The story of Cassius and Elspeth had begun with death and desperation, but it would continue across centuries with love, hope, and the soft breath of their sleeping daughter. Some endings were just beginnings in disguise, and some forevers were worth the darkness required to reach them.